Hi, I'm Gerald Harris. I was born January 26, 1926. So I'm 82 and a half years old at the present time. My parents, Harry and Ida Harris, uh, both came from Russia. My mother came with her parents, Chaim and Eva Manevich, which has been changed by the new generation to Manvitz. My father also came from Russia. He came through Galveston in the couple of years that they were a port of entry. My grandparents and my parents didn't ever talk about Russia, only the fact that they came there. Things were very hard, and they almost had to go undercover to escape Russian, the Tsar and the military at that time.
How did they happen to come to Omaha? What brought them there?
My mother and her her family came to Omaha because they knew somebody there, and my father started, I believe, in Des Moines, and came to Omaha. He was a tailor, and they met in Omaha and married. I was one of two children. My brother Arthur passed away about 10 years ago in New York. I know very little about their life in Russia. They almost refuse to talk about it. So I believe because they ate a lot of fish, they were called Litvaks. That's about as close to where they lived as I could think of.
What kind of work did your father do when he first arrived in Omaha?
My father opened a men's clothing store. I remember that when I was very young, because when I was in the store one time, maybe 4 or 5 years old, somebody came in and said, "See this suit, Harry? You sold it to me 30 years ago." And that was during the Depression. Then my folks opened Harris Dress Shop on South 24th, and because women bought more clothes than men, and they stayed in South Omaha, and I stayed in South Omaha. I went to South High School, where I was valedictorian of the class, the graduating class. I was also lieutenant colonel of the ROTC there, which is the highest rank there. My grandfather had a hotel that housed immigrants and people from Europe who worked in the packing houses. And I spent a lot of time with those people. And some of them taught me Polish, and some Russian, and some Czechs, etc., etc. When I went to high school, I went to South Lincoln grade school And I went back to the 50th anniversary, and I met a girl there, a Greek girl, uh, had a book on me, showing me selling ads to people for the school newspaper at that time, and I was in charge of the getting scrap metal for the service, for the war effort, etc., etc. She had everything about me. Marina Gugas, I'll never forget her name.
What were some of your experiences at South Lincoln? Do you recall those?
I had one teacher that I still recall vividly. Her name was Lucy Crockett. It sounds like, and she told me that everybody has their own opinion and their own likings. And what she said was, it's just like the man who kissed the cow. Everybody to his own taste. We had a playground there, and we played soccer, and it was right across the street from the Catholic church and Catholic school. And occasionally we had some differences, and pushing and shoving and so forth. But I really enjoyed South Lincoln. I don't know if it's there anymore. It was about 28th and F Street, right before you cross the bridge. And the bridge is something we played with quite a bit when I was a kid. The bridge, we played under the bridge. We walked like kids, on the top of the bridge, on the top of the post, where you could fall off from about 30 feet to the bottom. And but it was all fun. And I walked every place. I never had a bicycle. In fact, when I graduated South High, I got my first wristwatch. But we never knew we were poor. We had plenty to eat, and we had lots of friends in that area.
Were there a lot of Jewish families living around you?
I was the second Jew in South High. The other one was a girl whose father had a junkyard way down south, and her name, I can't think of it. But I was the only Jew, and I had my problems at South High. Some big guys were always picking on me. Not always, but occasionally. And I was on the debate team, and I went out for football, and they threw me around like a rag doll. I'm a small guy, and but I attended all the games. I traveled with the team. I helped with the equipment, etc., etc. I liked it. I like baseball too. I like all sports. I went back to South High at when I was in Omaha for one of the one of the anniversaries, and it's an amazing school. They have a department of theater. They have a great big computer department. Everything was brand new there. I think they spent, the city or whoever does it spent a fortune fixing it up. Another person I remember that sticks in my mind was Mr. Kunzel. He was a blind teacher, and he was in charge of the debate team, and when he was at the blackboard writing something, he could write. If somebody made a noise in the class, he threw an eraser at them, and he knew exactly who it was. That's what I like. A good friend of mine named Kopecky became a thoracic surgeon and moved to Denver. And I've seen him occasionally since I moved to Denver. Not the worst thing, but the very sad thing about being in the service at that time and being at South, I said, what happened to this guy? What happened to that guy? And they were killed. That's my experience at South.
How about your father's store? What do you remember about his store?
What I remember about his store, I was working there since I was 5 years old. He taught me how to wash the windows outside, and I had to wash them every Saturday, and I had to sweep the floor, and for that I received 10 cents. And we went to the Roseland, I went to the Roseland Theater on the next block. The Epsteins owned it. And 5 cents was for candy, and 5 cents was to get in. And I look forward to Saturdays. I didn't mind the working, but I liked the movie because they had a serial that continued next week type of thing. Also at the store, when I was 5 years old and up to the time I went into the service, I worked in the store. By the time I was 8, I was running the cash register and making change. When they were busy, I was showing women the hosiery and selling them hosiery. At that time, silk hosiery was a big thing, and it told me one thing after. But the thing I didn't like was when we had a sale, and it rained, and they had extra people in there to help them and so on, and it rained and or snowed real hard, nobody came. And I vowed to myself mentally that I would never go into a business where I had to wait for people to come to me. That I would go out and get and talk to people and make a living doing something that I didn't have to wait for people to come to me.
Now, did you work in the store during your high school years also?
Yes, until I went into our service.
You mentioned your grandparents having a hotel.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that, including the name if you remember.
I think it was called the Atlantic Hotel. It was on O Street. And maybe Fana told you about it. It passed on to her father. But the hotel was a was a wood structure. And they had gas meters in the thing in every room. And in order to get gas to cook, you had to put a quarter in the thing. And I love my grandfather more than anything in the world. And I was helping him paint the place. And we finally got to the top of the thing, and I couldn't reach it. So he held me by my feet upside down, and I had a paintbrush, and I was painting where he couldn't paint. And to this day, I can't stand heights. But for him, I'd do anything.
And you mentioned that you learned to speak different languages
Well,
because of yes.
I've learned phrases, most of which I've forgotten. But my grandfather, I taught him. I was teaching him English, and he taught me to read the forwards. And every day or two, because we lived with my grandparents on F Street. I would teach him English or help him read the English paper, and he would help me. He was teaching me how to read the forward, the forvets.
Did you speak Yiddish with your
Oh,
grandparents?
all the time. I still speak Yiddish. Sometimes I can't find a word good enough in English. I resort to Yiddish.
What were the people like in his hotel? A lot of Jewish people, or were they
No,
different?
no Jews. They're all hard workers. I remember one guy named Smokey. Smokey loved to drink cheap wine. And there was another guy that rented the garage because of my grandfather and grandmother didn't have a car. The guy rented a garage, and he was working for every year that I can think of on perpetual motion machine. And he had pipes and tools and this and that in there. I don't think he ever made it, but he kept working every day on his perpetual motion machine. And my grandfather kept track of what people owed him on an abacus by moving the beads. And that was intriguing to me.
What are some of your memories of your grandfather?
He loved people. And Uncle Sam, his predecessor there, loved people also. For example, I remember more about Sam than I do my grandfather, because Sam, if a guy was sick, he would take him to the doctor or to a place where he could get help. He loved the people. My grandfather loved them also. They were hard workers. In those days, you killed a cow with a hammer. You put in 8 to 10 hours a day, minimum 10 hours. And they didn't get much money for that. And I don't think he ever made them a loan, but he carried them when they couldn't pay.
What are some of your memories?
The only thing I can think of is like Gute Mishuma.
What are some of your memories of holiday dinners with your family?
They observed all the holidays. And we went to the shul on J or K Street, the Jewish shul there. Everybody went there. And I remember it was very interesting where they would raffle off the parts of the Torah and so forth. Ein tolerance, Lisi, straight tolerance. And some fellow that owned a furniture company always bought them after. And so forth. The dinners were strictly kosher. My grandparents were strictly kosher. In fact, going back, when I was a senior in high school or a junior, I don't remember. I was put into the National Honor Society, and they had a big dinner somewhere in some restaurant as an honor to all the National Honor Society people, and they served ham. And I had never tasted ham. And I was starving to death. Should I eat it or shouldn't eat it? Should I or shouldn't? I was fighting with myself. I remember fighting with myself. I finally tasted it. It wasn't it. And I thought I'd be dead by morning. I mean, we were Jewish.
What do you remember about going to the synagogue on holidays?
I always sat with my grandfather. And in the basement was a zoo. All the kids were running around all the time. And as we grew older, some of the girls got prettier. And some of them, one became a AZA queen, etc. But I didn't know many of the Jewish people because I was always involved with non-Jewish things. For example, when there was only one Jewish girl at South, I was involved with talking to other people. But my grandmother would die if I ever dated a shiksa. And she told me that every time that she talked. You can do anything, but don't date a shiksa.
Jerry, tell me a little bit about your father.
He was a quiet person. He loved pinochle. And at that time, there was a wholesale dress shop downtown on Lower Farnham Street. And called Bordy's. And he and the fellow that owned the place, Bordy, would play pinochle. And I went with him. That's either I think on Sundays or Saturdays. I don't know. No, it wasn't Saturday. It was busy, but Sundays. And there he'd buy some stuff for the week and play pinochle. And my father smoked like heck. And I remember almost every day I'd go down to the drugstore to buy 2 packs of Lucky Strikes. And he smoked and smoked and smoked. He died when he was 47. And I didn't think I would live to be 50. When I passed 50, I thought it was a miracle. But I think the smoke got him. He had a cerebral hemorrhage, which is probably because of smoking. They didn't call him cancer at that time. They didn't call him strokes. They had other names for things. And
did he still have the store when he passed away?
My mother and father had it, yeah. And my mother took over. And she had the store when I was in the service. And when my brother Art was in the Navy, and when he went back to school, he went back to California Art Institute. He was an artist. In fact, he'd draw pictures under the piano or under a table all the time. He'd get through geography by drawing a map for the teacher. And he got out of school and he had his portfolio, and everybody along the way from California to New York wanted to hire him, but he wanted to go to New York. That's where the big guys go. And he got a job with Young and Rubicon and stayed there till he died.
Did he have a family?
Yes, he had 3 boys. And they lived in New Rochelle, New York. And he commuted every day to the city. And quite often when I went to New York, when I was on the board of directors of the National Printing Association, I would see him. We'd have dinner or something together, or go out to his house, etc. But that was my early days.
I'd like to hear about your mother.
My mother was everything a mother could be. She was a good wife and a good mother to her children. She also worked with my father. So I usually fixed my own lunch. I didn't fix, I mean, on the weekends. But during the week, she would load me up in high school with 2 sandwiches were big as a horse, and I could always tell my locker because it's the only one that smelled.
From the salami,
Yeah.
I bet.
And sometimes I buy a drink, sometimes not. She wanted, and she would have made a fantastic lawyer. But in those days, women didn't become lawyers. she was smart. She was very smart. My father was intelligent, but my mother was smart. And I consider a shade of difference.
All right, now, after you graduated from high school, do I understand that you went right into the service there?
Yes.
Tell me about that period.
First, they sent me, I forgot to tell you, that I got a Regent Scholarship to Nebraska for 4 years. And I turned it down to go into the Army. And they sent me to Iowa State till I was 18. And then I took a test because I love photography. And they put me in the Signal Corps and in the radio. I became a small speed operator with click, clack, click, click. And then they moved me to radio repair, where I was working on pieces half as big as this room, and repairing them. And then something happened. It was called the Battle of the Bulge. And they took most of Camp Crowder in Missouri into the infantry. Went to Camp Benning, Georgia. They didn't even call it fort then, it was camp. And I took infantry training. And by the time I got through training, it either by luck or what, the Air Corps, it wasn't the Air Force at the time, it was the Air Corps, needed people because they had a new bomber called the B-29. The bomber had on the bomber they had the guns. They could point all the guns at the same place at the same time. And they put me into a school that made and repaired the mechanics that place the guns at the same place. In other words, a gun in the rear and a gun on the side, they could all be pointed at the same airplane or whatever. And I got out of that school, and I always have brains. I got into they put me in the separation center at Laurie. They transferred me to Laurie Field from Fort Benning, and at the Army Separation Center, we were separating pilots who were in the service a long time in the Pacific, because that's where the war started with Japan. And I became Sergeant Major of the separation base when I was 19. I had two officers over me, and they were never around. One was downtown at the stock market all the time, and the lieutenant was chasing girls. So I was handling 60 people, more than 60 people in the separation base, and assigning them making sure that everything happened. And that's when, that's how I got a lot of management experience at a very young age. But I also, a furniture person in South Omaha by the name of Flatterman. I don't know if you ever heard of him. Moved to Denver, and he had a daughter, Rosalind. And I was at their house. I looked them up because they were from Omaha. I looked them up, and Roz, I said, "Who's that person on your dresser?" And it happened to be my future wife. And our first date was at the Laurie Field Chapel on Friday night services. And we've been married 61 years.
Well, how many dates followed that first date?
Almost inseparable. She chased me till I caught her.
And then at that time, were you close to getting out of the service at that point?
Yeah. I took my first drink of whiskey at a folks' house on when Japan surrendered. I never had a drink of whiskey until then.
And I take it then you stayed in Denver.
I went back to Iowa State to finish the year, and then I transferred to the University of Denver on a GI Bill and so forth, and I graduated from the University of Denver in 1948.
What kind of a degree?
I had a degree in marketing and sales, and a minor in accounting. I should explain a little more. It was called sales analysis and market research, and a degree in accounting. And I could never get a job as an accountant because of one thing. I was Jewish, and things were tough in those days for Jews. For example, if you're interested in hearing this, General Motors guy was at school and said, he called me up and I said, "I want to talk to you." My name was Harris. So I went down and talked to him. And the minute he looked at me, he knew I was Jewish. And we talked a bit, and he said, "You know, your only hope at General Motors is to go to a place like Luby Chevrolet or Denver Buick. They were both owned by Jews. Otherwise, he didn't have a job for me." And Westinghouse, I interviewed with Westinghouse because market research was for the big guys. And the guy was nicer, but the guy that I slept through school by him reading my papers and copying them and so on was the guy that got the job. He was not Jewish. When I got into business, I spent several years with my father-in-law. And
what kind of business was that?
A plumbing business. And I learned plumbing by reading books and by the National Trade Organization and so forth. And the and I was a hell of a salesman. There was a place in Denver called Westwood. Westwood was unincorporated, and Denver took it over. And I went into Westwood and sold people. I sold houses, water mains, connect to Denver water, and also bathrooms. And I sold the hell out of them for one reason. I knew how to read, and the government had a program at that time where somebody could pay $5 down and $5 a month for that type of stuff, and I found it in the stuff, in what I was reading, and I sold and sold on that basis. But one thing I learned from that, my big competition was another guy with a big Cadillac and dressed very snazzy. I remember a great big silver belt and so on, and a big 10-gallon hat, and he was my competition. And one thing I learned was to dress nice after that. I was always dressed like the schleppers that I was talking to. But I left my wife's family's business in about 7 years. I didn't have, because it got to the point where I would either be a good business associate or a good son-in-law. And it was terribly hard to be both. So I didn't have anything to do, and I spent 1 year looking for something to do. And I was in the Optimist Club, and I was an optimist for about 40 years. But there was a fellow that had a one-man print shop. And after looking and traveling around the country, seeing what I could find and so on, I finally bought half of the print shop. So I became the second man in a one-man business. And I stayed in that print shop until I retired at the end of 2000. I might add that he was my partner for about 15 years, and then I bought him out. It was either buy or sell, and he decided that he'd rather have the money. So I bought the place, and things became, I wanted to expand and he didn't. He was 10 years older than me. He was a Catholic, but he was a nice Catholic. Because I enjoyed fish every Friday and so forth. But he had no desire to get any bigger. And my Jewish head wanted to get bigger.
So you learned the print business from the bottom up.
Yeah. I also learned that from books and organizations and so forth. And my son at that time was going to graduate school in New York, and he had a great job in Boston with a company that worked for NASA and those people. And my son supervised the building of a $500,000 building for them, and he was the fifth man in the company of 300. And I called him every Sunday. How you doing? This and that. One day he said, "Do you need any help?" And I said, "Are you kidding?" He had a good business. He had a good thing, and he was high up in the company. And I said, "I can pay you about a fifth of what they pay you." So we talked about it almost a year, and I went to Boston and met him. We went to New York and talked and talked and talked, and he decided to come to Denver. And he put his savvy of computers and that stuff into the business. And from the two-man company, when I retired, we had 160 people. If you look on the back wall there, we were the Small Business Company of the Year in Colorado in 1997. I was the best printer, or the best person of the year for the National Association of 3,200 members in the United States and Canada. And recently I got a deal from Channel 7, which is a station in cable station in Denver. I was also on the board of the Children's Asthma Research Institute and Hospital in Denver for 13 years. I was the only Jewish member of the Boys Club board at the time for 13 years. There are a couple more Jews on the board, but I'm off. I had a good life in Denver, but I'll tell you, mostly I wanted to prove something. And mostly I joined and did things with non-Jewish organizations, because there were plenty of Jewish guys in Denver that were doing good work for the Jewish people. But what I wanted to do in the Optimist organization, in the National Association of Printers and Lithographers, every place I went, I wanted to prove to them that Jewish people were good people, etc. And I wanted to change people's impression that Jews were givers, were takers, not givers, etc., etc. My whole life has been that way. I wanted to prove that Jews were just as good or better than everybody else. In closing, I'd like to say something about my wonderful wife, who's celebrating her 80th birthday this week in August. I love you. I love you. I love you. You mean the world to me, and you have for 61 years. To my son Howard, you're a big help, and the business would not have lasted without you. And you're carrying it on in great shape, and I'm very, very proud of you. And I love you. And to the most important people to me in the world are the three grandchildren who are famous in their own right. Brent is just started as a teacher at Elizabeth, Colorado Middle School, a sixth grade teacher in geography, etc. And I know that he'll do a fantastic job. Kim and Valerie are both in New York, and Valerie is a gal who works for a company that gives parties for corporations, etc. She is in charge of planning and has all the responsibilities of making sure that it starts right and it continues to happen until it's finished. Kim, my oldest grandchild, spent 4 years in Austria as a teacher in a school, Montessori school. She came back to the United States, and and she helped originate in Austria called Letters to the Stars, in which the school children wrote letters to people who have been in the Holocaust and have left Austria. She then came to the United States and took over Letters to the Stars in the States, and she got some 300 people from the United States to go to Austria at the expense of the Austrian government and the Letters to the Stars organization to see what Austria was like today, and it turned out to be an amazing experience. And I would give my life to any one of them. They are the future. They're smart. They're goal-oriented. And me, I just look on and cavil. Thank you.